Welcome back. This is Alfred Lambremont Webre, and we're on Exopolitics Radio, and we're with a very distinguished UFO and exopolitics researcher, Randy Kitchur, who, first of all, is a UFO experiencer himself and had a UFO close encounter in August of 1981, has a distinguished academic background, and spent 5 years of graduate school at the University of Manitoba Department of Political Sciences in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and has a 4-year bachelor degree honors, BA honors degree in politics from Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, in addition to 2.5 years of sociology psychology at the University of Winnipeg, again in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And while at graduate school at the Department of Political Studies in Winnipeg, Mr. Kitchur worked on a master's thesis dealing with the UFO cover-up. Randy Kitchur remains the official spokesman for the recently deceased Stan Fulham, who's a former Canadian NORAD officer and author of the book Challenges for Change, who accurately predicted UFO displays over New York City on October 13th, 2010, and as we'll learn today, over Moscow during the first week of January 2011, and London during the second week of January 2011. And Mr. Kitchur, along with one of Mr. Fulham's sons, continues to operate the firm which sells Challenges of Change, Stan Fulham's book, through his website, which you can find at ExopoliticsTV.com. Welcome, Randy.
Hi, Alfred. Nice to talk to you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to start with some news, some breaking developments, and that is that we've learned that the United States Air Force is taking steps, legal steps, such that if Stan Fulham were alive today, he couldn't speak about his contacts with the UFOs and presumably with the Galactic Governance Council.
Mm-hmm. Yes, earlier today, the indefatigable Larry Bryant, who has done extensive Freedom of Information requests throughout, I think, the last 40 years, tremendous UFO researcher, has sent me what is from the U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command. It's a directive specifically aimed at Minot Air Force Base and Maelstrom personnel, where there have been UFO overflights in the past in Warren as well as in Wyoming. What it does is it prohibits all Global Strike Command personnel from publicly discussing their own UFO or ET encounters and any UFO or ET encounters reports of others to them. Now, apparently, this is just trying to make sure that the public doesn't know about this and it doesn't get it from a first-hand, credible military source. Now, it's very interesting in that at the same time as what's going on in Egypt, you have the country essentially holding in the highest possible esteem their military, and you have directives here from the U.S. Air Force saying, lie to your people, and it just makes it even worse for them, and they're digging a bigger hole, and this is just right now, the most recent instance or outrage of what they were doing.
So Stan Fulham actually passed away on December 19th, 2010, shortly after his December 3rd, I believe, 2010 communique. So really, you are the person who is now reporting on whether or not these predictions are fulfilled, and you're doing so because you're a civilian, and if Mr. Fulham were here, he could not do so or would be in jeopardy of doing so.
Well, he's a Canadian. This applies to American personnel, but I'm sure that...
Well, no, because he...
Oh, yes, you're right. He worked for NORAD.
Yeah, sure.
That's absolutely correct.
He was a NORAD officer, and I would believe that would apply to that joint command. Mm-hmm. Yep. It would especially apply to the joint command because Stan Fulham was in charge of. He's the person who would oversee the radar, and then would direct the interceptors.
Sure, the interceptors.
And in fact, he had directed a number of interceptions of UFOs over the North American continent.
Yeah, and the policy when he experienced having to actually just do that precisely, it was more of an informal thing. They just told him, well, nothing happened, and you're going to report that to the media, correct? And that was it. He didn't have to sign anything. There were no threats of retaliatory pressures. There was that implication, of course, but it wasn't something that was written down where they could be prosecuted back then.
Right. Now, you have prepared a very impressive both technical assessment of the technical UFO displays and predictions for 3 venues. One is New York City, October 13, 2010, Moscow, Russia, the first week of January 2011, and London, UK, the second week of January 2011, which were the 3 dates that through an interdimensional communication, the purported or reported Regional Galactic Governance Council stated that they would have their ships appear over those 3 venues as a confirmation that their information, that they existed, and we're now making plans to intervene on Earth because of our ecological, because our ecology was in jeopardy. And I've seen both your technical evaluation in terms of the various videos that you have assembled, and also your textual evaluation, and we will be reprinting these in full at examiner.com. But I would like to ask you to begin to go through these. We'll start with New York City, which is the first date that the Galactic Governance Council, through Stan Fulham, predicted that they would appear over on October 13, 2010. And you start out with meteorological data of the wind speed and direction over New York City.
I have conclusive proof here that there were no balloons that were coming from the northwest that were released at 1 o'clock towards Manhattan. Anyone with the ability to access the New York meteorological information for that specific day, and if you look for 1 o'clock, I've got that right in front of me here. The winds were calm, and they remained calm until 1:15 when they went north at 6.4 kilometers, and north again, and then back to calm, and then to the northeast, and then calm and calm again, and then northeast. And that continued until, I've looked as far as 2:30. Actually, I'm looking further now, and they're just either remaining calm or going towards the northeast. Now, this school was located in the northwest. Balloons do not have the ability, unless they're anti-gravitational balloons, to go against the wind for several hours, and at that, in calm winds as well, too. So, as I'm just scrolling through here, I'm looking, and all I'm seeing is northeast, northwest winds Finally, they're going through till about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. They're all calm. There are no winds going towards the southeast, as far as I can tell throughout. Oh, hang on. At 7:27, we have winds going. Okay, so these were time-traveling balloons. Yeah,
right.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
Yeah. Meaning that what you're saying, for those who may not be familiar with the balloon reference, is that some of the media attempted to explain away the UFO reports over New York City by stating that they were balloons released at a school event.
At beginning at about the 6 o'clock news hour. Actually, I see that there is one southeast at 7:07 going 4.8 kilometers per hour. Now, this school was 21 miles away, so it would have taken about 5 hours for them to get there. So that rules out the possibility. People just need to take that notion out of their minds. It's checked the weather report. It's physically impossible for that to have been the explanation. Also, there were 12 balloons that were released by a teacher, and people reported up to 200 objects in the sky. And in the videos that you can get in the video report, they're crystal clear videos. They're information. There is some of them, sometimes there are 5 of them, sometimes there's 7. And beginning of the CBS video, it's very clear that there are 3 balloons in very close proximity. People might think, oh yeah, they're on a string. Then about a few minutes later, one of the balloons moves very far away, maybe 30 feet away, and it maintains kind of a roughly V-shaped pointing to the right for several more minutes, holding perfect formation. Now, that's impossible. You will not, those were not balloons.
Right. Now, to go back to that kind of eventful day, October 13th, 2010, that was a day that really Stan Fulham became a household name to many people around the world and to the mainstream media around the world. And you write that you received media requests for interviews from the New York Times, Coast to Coast, Fox News, Inside Edition. Could you just tell us a bit about what that was like that day?
Well, what had happened was I got a first phone call about 10 o'clock in the morning from New York 1 TV. And this is further proof because this is well before 1 o'clock New York time. And they were saying that there were reports of a UFO over New York. And I thought, well, that's interesting. That's when Stan predicted. I'm glad the media picked up on that. A short while later, New York Daily News called me and said, oh, we're getting all these reports. And I thought, well, gee, my God, I better call Stan and let him know. And I called him, and the phone started ringing and ringing and ringing. And I put the ringer off because I wanted to concentrate on what I was going to do that day. And by the time I checked it, my phone was filled up with just unbelievable amount of phone calls. And I said to Stan, well, what do we do? He just said, well, let it sit for a day or so, and we'll just get to them later and see what this is all about. And as seen with my email, I thought, well, I'm going to be flooded with email. And I was flooded with emails, thousands and thousands of emails when we opened it up at Stan's place. And we were just shocked and amazed. We were staring at each other. We didn't know whether to laugh or we were just totally shocked. We had requests from New York Times, from Inside Edition in particular. They were very frantic. They were even going to my Facebook page and emailing me. And they were the people that did the hit piece with the balloons. I presume that what they must have thought it was that we were just ignoring them. But the fact is, I didn't even open my email till a couple of days later. So the first priority, of course, was to get back to the people at New York Times, and we did, and we got back to quite a few other people. And on the day that Stan was interviewed by the New York Times, he was also interviewed by Coast to Coast. So that we would probably regard as the pinnacle of most people's success, to have an event where you're getting attention from the world's largest, or one of the world's largest newspapers and the world's largest overnight radio programs. And so that went on the phone calls went on for several weeks. And finally, I decided to start answering them. And most of the people, we had dealt with because of the emails with media requests. But people were frantic. They wanted information. They wanted to know what was going on. And And by the time we got back to them, it took about 2 weeks or so, and then the emails, well, that went on for, took about a month to get back to these thousands and thousands of people.
Right. And what was your sense when the balloon, you talk about Inside Edition's hit piece, when the balloon story surfaced, did you have a sense that there was somebody trying to promote that? Or,
no. They were very sincere. We had producers, all kinds of reporters. I would say about 5 different people contacting me through the phone, through emails, through my Facebook page, repeated multiple ones. And then it was later that day, I guess, that they went to this at 6 o'clock, immediate judgment. Yeah, they were balloons. And as I just presented you, the meteorological proof, they weren't balloons.
Right. Now, what was Stan like on October 13th when this event occurred? Were you around him? Did you have a chance to interact with him on that day?
I actually didn't see Stan in person. We talked about what was going on over the phone. I think it was this would have been a Tuesday or so, and I was over at his place. I think on a Friday. Maybe I think it might have been like 3 days until I opened up the emails. I said, Stan, I really want to open up my emails so we can get together and I can show you them. And he was kind of busy, and so I did it right in front of him, and we were both aghast, or I wouldn't say aghast, but we were just in disbelief of what was there waiting for us. So, we were just very calm, and he had total sublime confidence that, this event happened, and it's being reported in the media. We're getting the media reports. We'll just wait and see. So it was just a matter of staying calm and, just accepting what the result would be. Right.
Now, let's move from October 13th over to January 2011. Maybe you want to give the listeners some idea of why we're focusing on January 2011.
What had happened was early December, out of the blue, just Stan called me up and said, I have new predictions. And prior to then, he had been talking with the transcenders through Rick Thurston. He's the deep trance medium that goes into a self-hypnotic state, and found years ago that he could communicate with interdimensional beings from other dimensions. And one of the abilities was to communicate with extraterrestrial civilizations. And so Stan had been in contact with Rick Thurston for the past 10 or so years. It's a very expensive process. It's not like something where you just call up a person and say, what do you think of this? It's very expensive. And Rick Thurston has been doing this for decades. Now, the thing about Rick Thurston, he's in Ontario, Canada, and there's a thing called the Internet. And the thing with the Internet is, once you post something, it stays there forever, pretty much. And if you want to expose, say, a hoaxer or someone that's, not just a basic liar, you can do it on the Internet. Now, there's all kinds of mediums and all kinds of trance channelers on the Internet, and they have experiences, and they tell people things, and people can post things, this wasn't true, this isn't accurate. You can go and search for Rick Thurston. It's spelled R-I-K, Thurston, Thurston, and I challenge anyone to find one single person who has ever said that this guy's a fraud. It's not on the Internet. This person is bang on with what he says, and for Stan, being a military person who was given some of the deepest, darkest secrets from NORAD through one of their experts on UFOs for situation for decades, he would know, and whether he was being told something that's not true, and he wouldn't be investing so much of his hard-earned money communicating sometimes on a weekly basis, but mostly on a monthly basis with Thurston for a decade. So what had happened was he, after these predictions that he was discussing with him on the phone, he was getting sort of trying to fine-tune it, and he was saying definitely Moscow the first week of January. But he wasn't quite sure about whether it was going to be London or Paris for the second week of January, and he was vacillating between those two when he finally decided, well, it's going to be London. And I said, are you sure? Because, we want to be accurate about this. He said, absolutely 100% sure. My source, that he relies upon never lies to him. And now I should also kind of get into where his source is, because people sometimes misinterpret that the transcenders actually provided him this information. Actually, Stan has, I guess you would want to call it an interdimensional spirit guide or guardian angel that communicated with him when he was sleeping, and he would write down what he was told. And this went on for years and years. And he would take this information and go to the transcenders to have it confirmed. And this is what he did with his UFO information, and specifically these dates. Now, the October 13th date, that was given to him a year and a half before from this spirit guide of his, before it actually happened. And Stan wrote about it in his book on April the 16th, which just so happens to be on his birth date, 6 months almost to the day of this event in New York. So he had that way out there, long before these events occurred. And so this is why he felt he could rely upon the source and the transcenders confirming it for the first and second week of January. Now, I was kind of worried about that, because I said, Stan, you're held in the highest esteem by the UFO community here. Like, what if you're wrong? And he said, no, I'm not going to be wrong. I'm going to be right. And I said, okay, Stan, I'll post what you send me. And he wrote this prediction for early December. And in the prediction, it says, in my last reading with the transcenders on Tuesday, October 13th, 2010, the transcenders advised me of the following predictions for the Pleiadian UFO displays. There will be a major UFO display over Moscow between the end of the first part of January 2011 and the second week of January 2011. This display will be followed by a major display over London approximately 7 days later. So that's essentially where that comes from.
Right. Now, let's get, you said the first part of January I spent glued to TV news reports watching for something to happen over Moscow. Mm-hmm. A day or so after the 7th, it dawned on me I needed to surf the internet if I wanted to find out what was going on in Moscow. Could you talk about your process there?
Mm-hmm. I get Russia Today on my TV, and I was thinking that, okay, well, they've reported in the past, I can see on the October 13th event, so I thought, well, maybe the ones that could be relied upon for anything that appeared over Moscow. And I would, be shifting between them and CNN and BBC and Al Jazeera and all these other stations waiting to see what was happening over Moscow. And when it didn't happen on the TV, I thought, okay, well, wait a minute. You're not going to get this stuff on the TV. They're not going to report it. You know what the media's like. You go to the internet. And so I thought, well, how do I get proof? And so I went to YouTube. And I found this explosion of YouTube videos over Moscow. There was this incredible wave that started on the 1st of January and ended roughly after the 31st of January over Moscow. It went through the entire month. But on the specific day that Stan actually said there was a UFO sighting that was recorded on the 7th, exactly when he said, and I don't recall a UFO flap like this in history. There has been nothing like this. All these videos over one city, I think I had like 24 of them. And for every event, you're going to have like 1 out of 100 videos. That just doesn't happen. Like, for people just don't happen to have a video camera handy when there's a UFO hovering in the sky. And so I would, take these and post them to the site, and they just accumulated and accumulated, and I've included them in the technical report, and some of them I've given explanations for, and one in particular, a couple in particular. One that took place, it was between apartment blocks, a daylight video between apartment blocks in Moscow, just low, a disc that's spinning around, and it's in very good, you can see it in very good definition, but then it was covered by the Russian media near the end of the month. I don't know if I have the specific date here, but it was right near the end of the month. That's also posted up there. and it was enhanced, and you can see incredible detail of this. Now, altogether, like I was mentioning, I have over 24. In the technical report, I've only included about the best 20 or so. But they are taken by a variety of individuals. There's even one taken over the Kremlin of this green floating orb, taken from a webcam. Couldn't possibly be hoaxed. There was the incredible one that took place on the 18th that has about, right now, last I looked a couple of days ago, 124,000 hits on it, of this morphing object that a person took from an apartment block hovering over Moscow. That was it's an incredibly beautiful object, and, people didn't panic when these things were happening, and, it just very fortunate that people in Moscow are very level-headed when it comes to this, unlike other places in the world where they send their jets after them.
Right. So, what are some of the highlights that you remember seeing from the Moscow?
Okay.
videos?
Well, see, the first one took place on the first. Actually, it's the second. There were some people. They were out in the field. It's a daylight event. There were about 3 of them, and they're pointing up at this object in the sky. And they're having some trouble for it to come into focus at the beginning. And all of a sudden, you see this disc, and it's flashing. It's pulsing lights every little few seconds or so. And this went on for what was it now? 3 minutes and 35 seconds. It's hovering there. Sometimes it goes back into the clouds. Sometimes it comes out of the clouds and flashes, and then it begins to flash very quickly at certain times, and other times it's just hovering as a disc. And this is up there. It's took place earlier prior to the. But what Stan also told me, because if people would recall what was happening in October, there were events that were taking place all over the U.S. And what Stan told me about was he was actually told that what they're trying to do is they're trying to lessen people's anxiety and fear levels by kind of preparing the ground, just making sure that people are aware that they're here, and so that this is, I think, what happened in Moscow. You had these events that were occurring prior to the event. Now, what had later happened was there was quite a number of videos that were taken from a specific location from an apartment building from a gentleman named Oleg. And he has these remarkable videos. Now, people would say, these are helicopters, but no, this was a very specific place where he'd be focusing on certain buildings, and at various times throughout the month, you would see these red orbs, and they weren't helicopters. They would be hovering there for long periods of time, and then they would meander slowly over in various directions, and they would be some orbs would appear just out of nowhere, like they're appearing from another dimension to join them. And what I think might be happening is Oleg might be a contactee. And so people would say, well, how come other people don't see them? And he'd say, well, because these are small objects. They're like a few centimeters across, and you have to be looking for them. And other things I should point out, that it's very cold in Moscow. You don't have people standing around in the middle of a city staring up at the sky. First of all, it's dangerous if you're either driving a car or walking. You tend to get run over if you're looking at the sky while crossing the street. And also, people don't want to hang out outdoors if it's minus 30 degrees outside. But this gentleman happened to know exactly where to point his camera and watch for them, and they've been appearing quite regularly for him. So he's done a yeoman's job in getting this stuff out there. There's other ones. Say there would be one taken through. You can see it through the trees. This wouldn't. I don't have the specific. This is about 3 weeks ago. You can see trees, and you can see an orb going through the trees. Most of the objects were orbs. They weren't the traditional saucer-shaped object that most people would report, or disc-shaped object. Most of them were orbs, but you do have that one specifically that was taken between the apartment blocks, recently reported on by the Russian media. There is another very interesting one. The person who took the image off the webcam of the green orb over the Kremlin also videotaped something. Apparently, it looks like it's in his backyard. a very bright light. You can see the overhang of the roof of the house, and he's pointing the camera upwards, and you see this incredibly bright object, as bright as the sun, and it just zips away like at incredible speed. It's about a 10-second video, but it's undeniable. It's just amazing. And I don't know if I really want to get into this right now, but right at the moment, if you can recall what's going on over Jerusalem now, at 1 o'clock on the 28th, Jerusalem time, there was this UFO spiral that was seen over Kazakhstan, and it's a very incredible object. You see this thing spinning, and it's just gigantic. And if you follow along the video on YouTube, you'll see that it's a compilation of various vantage points taken as it progresses from over Kazakhstan moving towards Moscow. Now, the thing that's unique here or special about it is if you take a look at the time that it was taken exactly or just after 1 o'clock, the equivalent. I think they were 5 hours ahead. So this would be taken, in a time zone that corresponded precisely with when the event in Jerusalem. So I don't know if it's related.
You mean when you say the event in Jerusalem?
Jerusalem. Okay.
Are you talking about the Dome of the Rock?
Yes, the Temple Mount. Yeah.
Okay, so you've switched over to two events that are really not related to the Stan Fulham events. These are separate events, right?
Those are totally separate. Stan didn't make any prediction about Jerusalem.
Right.
And he didn't make any prediction about Kazakhstan. But it happened that those events took place.
Right. Okay. Because I just want to mention that with regard to the spirals, there was a Norway spiral on November 9th, 2009, before the Barack Obama Oslo speech. That was directly over the HARP installation in northern Norway, and a number of analysts tie that into HARP and kind of a Project Blue Book, psychological warfare manipulation program. So there's a lot of discussion around that. Could you address? But now that you've brought it up, and I want to put the Jerusalem orb to the side a second, because we'll get to that later in the program, because it's very important that you address that. Could you address the issue that some people are bringing up, that these are actually either holographic images and part of a kind of a Project Blue Beam psychological attack, and that is that I guess there are two kind of arguments. One argument is that the October 13th, the Moscow and the London are actually holograms or some kind of human technology, and that Stan is really promoting some kind of a false flag.
No.
Right.
I know.
And then the obverse of that is that these are kind of manipulatory ETs, and that it's not a benevolent council, but it's a manipulation of negative ETs that are doing this. I wonder if you could address both of those points right now.
Okay, well, if people don't want to believe their own eyes, they can go with the hologram blue beam. Stan was not any type of military disinformation operative. He was a private individual. He had every intention of exposing the truth about UFO reality. He wasn't trying to deceive anyone into believing that they're here and we better fear them or else. And with regard to them not being benevolent or peaceful, well, there's absolutely no evidence that they're manipulative or, they do what they want, they go where they want, and there's no negative impact upon human civilization that I've ever been able to see with regard to these objects over Moscow or the ones over London or any others for that matter. the ones that he specifically addressed this issue, saying that these were specifically Pleiadians. He didn't attribute them to Greys or what he would call the Berties or any other negative influence. He would say that this is a positive thing. They're here because our civilization is going to become extinct from environmental degradation, collapsing of the atmosphere due to the increasing greenhouse gas level that cannot be scaled back through human technology. And their intent is to preserve humanity because, for one reason, the emotional complexity that exists here is supposed to be unique in the universe. And the thing that he would always try to emphasize to people is that Earth isn't unique. This has happened throughout the universe thousands of times, and we should consider ourselves very special and privileged that they're going to actually intervene and save us from ourselves. So I don't see any negative or manipulative type of I see the exact opposite. They would wanting to be facilitating our destruction if that were the case, and there's no evidence of that.
Right. Now, let's go over to the second event that you mentioned, the second of the two parallel events that you mentioned, and that is the January 28th UFO orb, which appeared over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which you have actually analyzed and have compared to a specific type of UFO orb that you have investigated in the Winnipeg area in, I believe it was 2008, was it?
Yes, March of 2008. You see, Stan isn't the only person that I know personally who is having extensive interdimensional contact. I have an individual I've been working with here in Winnipeg for the last, let's say, maybe 5 years, and I have another website. If you just Google Interdimensional Angels, it will be right at the very top. This gentleman is experiencing contact with orbs, and he photographs them and he videotapes them, and I'm the webmaster. I put up everything for him. I've even seen them in his backyard personally. I've hit them with lasers, and they go out, and then they appear back, and hit them with a laser again, and they go out, and there's no doubt, And so he was back in March of 2008, and he was with his dog outside, and he looked up, and there's an orb, and his dog sits down and looks at the roof, and he follows his dog's train of vision, and the orb that had been hundreds of feet above his house was now sitting on his roof. It's like a mother of pearl, blue-white, size of a compact car object, and he has a cell phone camera on him all the time because he sees, they pop up whenever. They've even appeared in his house. So he takes a series of photographs of it, and we have them posted, and he's going to take the fifth photograph, and all of a sudden he says it shoots up just like a bullet, totally without any sound, no air displacement whatsoever, exactly like the Jerusalem orb. Exactly. It looks exactly like it. I've got the photographs on my website. I don't have it actually showing it shooting up to the sky, but I have the exact, you can see it very clearly. It's kind of a mother of pearl white object. And I showed it to him, and he just, I showed him the videos, and he just laughed, and I saw that. It's kind of, So it's corroboration. This isn't a person that would hoax something like that. He saw this. He's got the photographs of it, and the Jerusalem orb did the exact same thing as what this contact he here did in Winnipeg. And
right.
There's no, so
now,
good enough for me.
No, right now, as you know, there's been a fierce debate on the internet, and in fact, now in the mainstream media on MSNBC and other places about the hoaxing and the hoaxing and the authenticity of the Dome of the Rock UFO, and I don't want any of that to bleed onto the
with regard to Stan.
I would like to deal with the Dome of the Rock UFO orb right now.
Okay.
At Above Top Secret, which is a UFO discussion platform, internet platform, there was a special link that was sent out by them, and the purpose of that link, which I will, if you haven't seen it, I will send it to you after the show, because I'm going to ask you to submit an analysis that I'd like to publish in Examiner.com, showing that in fact the Dome with the Rock video is authentic, and I've been able to see from your analysis that you've been able to deconstruct all of the arguments of the debunkers of the number 1, number 2, and number 4 videos of the Dome of the Rock UFO orb. It's just that kind of number 3 video where they have a woman with a southern accent from the U.S. come in and kind of talk about things that is sort of hoaxy.
Well, I haven't seen that specific analysis, but my own analysis, it's very clearly a photo, and you can tell because you don't see the twinkling lights or blinking lights. You can see that very clearly in the original first 2 videos, and you can see in the 4th video, you can see cars going up and down the street, and it was taken by 2 16-year-olds. Give me a break, from 3 different perspectives. You can actually see, if you look at some of the Zoom videos, you can see in the first one on the gentleman in the foreground that's taking the video on his cell phone camera, you can see the object coming down on his cell phone camera. Okay, well, how many Steven Spielbergs are out there that do this? These are real events. It not just corroborates what exactly my contact here experienced. You can look at the street lights in the top right-hand corner. You can see the same color being reflected off the shirt of this gentleman. There's so many aspects to this. And in the original video, because if you're looking at 2nd and 3rd generation copies of it, you're going to see a little bit of degrading of it. But when you see the high-definition versions, you can actually see the twinkling lights in Jerusalem, and well, it's just so obvious that if you want to believe your own eyes, fine. You can believe your own eyes, and that's what you should do. But if you're going to believe people that are deliberately trying to manipulate your thought process and saying that you don't see what you do see because it's impossible, because UFOs don't exist, well, I'm sorry, but there are individuals that will do that because they want to get their viewpoints expressed. The problem is when you come to a video like the 3rd, and I haven't been able to track down where the original comes from. You can also check the YouTube channel. You can look into their backgrounds. You've got people like Michael Cohen who've interviewed these witnesses, and these aren't people that are, there's nothing in it for them.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go back to our analysis of the Stanley Fulham UFO predictions, because that's really what this particular program is about.
Yeah, we should get into London.
We're going to London, and you say that London was a little different.
Yeah. See, there weren't the enormity of the or just sheer volume of videos coming out of London. What happened in London was the month was bookended. There was a major event at the beginning of the month and a major event, in fact, on the 1st, and a major event on the 31st. And then right in the middle, and this is going to relate to what's being reported of Jerusalem, and I'll get to that in a moment. On the 1st of the month, we had this over Camden. That's in central London. We have basically a fleet of UFOs flying over top of central London in a pattern, and one after the other. And you do not have Chinese lanterns that are going to hold precise positions in the sky and traverse the skies of London. When they're spaced hundreds of meters apart. And this took place exactly on the 1st of the month. Now, on the end of the month, you have over a residential area, you have a traditional disc-shaped object at night. It's a little bit more difficult to see, but you can clearly see it's a disc-shaped object, residential area moving back and forth. And so it was, and it's really strange because you have something at the beginning of the month, at the end of the month. There were other ones in London, but those they weren't very clear, and I wouldn't attribute them to what Stan was referring to. Now, Stan's prediction, if we go back to it, was what he said very specifically, and you have to look at it very carefully. there will be a major UFO display over London between the end of the first part of January 2011 and the second week of January 2011. Okay, the second week begins on the 14th. And it continues, this display will be followed by a major display over London approximately 7 days later. Okay, so that means 7 days later from then, okay, you've got is the 14th. And so what happened on the 14th in Camden, this is where the first event took place. You have this daylight event where this person is filming in downtown, and all of a sudden you see this orb, and it floats along horizontally for maybe dozens of feet, and all of a sudden it flies above the person doing the filming, and then it zips away, and you can very clearly see it because the person had the good sense to slow it down and to freeze frame it, and so you can see exactly what it is, and you can see the shape, and you can see the luminosity, and so on and so forth. Now, this was exactly to the day when you had the prediction from Stan from the 14th. So I didn't really think so much of it at that time. I just thought, well, that's it's interesting that here's another orb, exactly what he said, and I was waiting for this another event to occur or other events to occur. So then all of a sudden, there was a report that you had sent me that the front page of Jerusalem's leading newspaper had reported on an event that took place at the Wailing Wall on the 16th, and the scientists were being quoted saying that this might be validation of Stan's mentioning that ETs will be coming here to beat us, and the Wailing Wall might be a very good place for that. Now, in this Wailing Wall orb, and I've got that posted as a comparison with the one filmed in Camden on the 14th. Interesting that this was filmed on the 16th of December, only 3 days before Stan died. And I think there's some significance in there. Now, what you have in this video, you have daylight video of people milling around the Wailing Wall, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, materializes out of like another dimension, a blue-white orb looking exactly like the one over Camden. It zips along to the right and it zips along to the left, and it's gone. And this is what the one that these Israeli scientists were saying seems to be indications of, well, maybe this is interdimensional communication here, just like Stan was talking about, and this would be a good place for that. But if you compare them, they're exactly the same looking orb. One took place in London on the 14th, corroborating Stan's prediction, and one took place on a month earlier over Jerusalem. And what happened? Well, a little later after that, you have this event that took place January 28th of this incredible object that was filmed by 3 different people from 3 different angles, exactly the same spot. I think that's what the significance is. This was the prelude to it. Stan's basically saying, people, if they don't panic and they remain calm, the displays will continue. And I think that's what it was.
Right. Now, we have just a few minutes left in this segment, and if we just step back a bit, what these 3 dates over New York, Moscow, and London from Stan's book, Challenges of Change, are meant to be is the overflights of these cities by the vehicles of the Pleiadians, who are in fact representatives of a regional galactic governance council, including Alpha Centaurians, Sirians, Pleiadians, Greys, and others.
Cities and Compsuli.
Yeah. Now, in your judgment as a UFO expert and an exopolitics expert, can you honestly say that these orbs are interdimensional ships of such a regional galactic governance council?
I would not doubt for a moment anything Stan says. To the best of his will, on this specific subject, I would say that without a doubt, this was his primary area of focus, and he would not be making a fool of himself if he didn't actually believe all this to be absolutely true or have confirmation that it was true. I would say, when you look at these things that appear as out of nowhere, they don't come from Well, you can, like, if you want to call hyperspace interdimensional space, but they clearly materialize out of nowhere, and they do incredible things, and we don't have that type of technology. And I've heard, say, someone like Nick Pope suggesting that maybe the object over Jerusalem might have been something that the Israeli military has, and I don't think so. I find that actually quite laughable. Right.
Now, finally, again, we're working here with just a couple of more minutes. Yourself, there is quite a period of plans of this council are to land around 2014 and with a speech at the UN and begin to clean up the atmosphere, and just predicting a huge period of change between now and 2014 and collapse of the old order and a new way of living. Is that something that you see realistically happening?
Well, the thing about the UN, it's a little bit distant for me, but what Stan did write about was the environmental collapse. And you see, like, what's going on in Australia and throughout the world, all these massive floods. And you look at the tumultuous change that's taking place politically in Tunisia and Egypt, and just things that could not be imagined a month ago. You know, like look at the storms that have been taking place in Australia. This incredible storm, and the flooding, and it just, you know, it's just confirmation of what he says in his book are going to be taking place, and that's to get our attention. And that's what these displays are for. They're to get our attention. Now, to the UN issue, as I'm, you know, pointing out, that I never doubt Stan when he says something. It's, you know, I have no inside information on that, but you know, he wrote it and he predicted it, and you know, what he did say is what's going to be happening next or after these events in London and in Moscow was, yeah, the events would be continuing and they'd be increasing in duration and intensity, and then you get this thing over Jerusalem. And yeah, that's, to me, that's pretty good validation. Like, you know, you can get people to maybe predict things, but I've never known or heard of anyone that could ever predict 3 UFO events on the specific day that he mentions. You know, and well, that to me, like, that's really extraordinary. And so, you know, coming to the conclusion that he was pretty, you know, exactly accurate on those 3 events, I would not, you know, I wouldn't give odds against that not happening.
Now, finally, Stan mentioned that he had completed a book, and perhaps another one, but he had completed a book on different ET races. Is that something that you and
Stan actually there are 2 books. Well, I've talked to his son about getting this published, either you know, either electronically or in print form. There are 2 books specifically that he finished. One dealing with UFOs in the Bermuda Triangle, and what he was also, there's a book dealing with what he called strange aliens. These are the ones, the lesser known ones in his typology of the alien civilization. You know, apparently they're about 250 page books each. I haven't seen them myself, and I will, you know, make some efforts to get those out to the public somehow, you know, in some form. But essentially, they're all complete, except he was trying to incorporate information with regard to the October 13th prediction and to put a forward in them. But his health was just too very, you know, he was struggling, and you know, he got to a point where he couldn't speak, and he didn't have the energy to type anymore, and he just couldn't do anymore. So, you know, if necessary, I think I could probably finish off the part about the October 13th predictions and the forwards for those books. But again, I have to approach his son about that and see if we can get those up.
Now, finally, just very quickly, how can people get in touch with you and with the information about Stan Fulham?
Well, just have to simply Google Challenges of Change book, and you'll get us right there at the very top link. It takes you directly there. And for me, I prefer that they use the address that I use for the book, and that's challengesofchange@hotmail.com. Very simple, challengesofchange@hotmail.com. And I welcome discussion of this, but if they're going to argue, saying, well, no, this isn't true, and I really don't have time for that because I know what the truth is with regard to his predictions.
Good. Well, Randy Kitchur, thank you very much, and we hope that you will join us as events develop in this with regard to this arena and this very important area of public events for Earth and for the regional galactic governance.
Well, thanks for this opportunity, Alfred. As you know, I've been around for quite a while, and I know everyone knows me, but I've been one of those people that have sort of managed to stay out of the forays, and I do that deliberately because I don't have time for the emotional arguments that take place, and I just prefer to do the research and come to the conclusions and leave the arguing to other people. But I do all I can to advance the exopolitics and UFO disclosure agenda, and I've spent a good decade or so doing that, and I will continue to do so.
Well, thank you very much for all your work, Randy. We've been with Randy Kitchur, who has advanced graduate education in political science and is a UFO expert and is the spokesperson for the affairs of Stan Fulham. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Webre. Please stay tuned. Thank you.